of cards. What I want you to do is from in this deck, I want you to try to see one card. Not this one, but look closely. Try to see one inside. Did you get one? Here, I'll do it again. It might have been too quick. Try to see a card inside if you can. Did you see one? You think you did? Don't say it. Just hold it in your mind. I know this is not it, but visualize your card right here.
It's not me. Hi. Today I will talk about how to understand people. As you see, some magicians know how to do that, because I guess many of you had the thought about this card or not. Did you know the trick you've just seen? No? And who were thinking about the same card? Yes, most people, I guess. So there's a reason for that. First of all, I want to tell you a disclaimer. It's not a technical presentation. It's about advanced persistent threat, and those are users. They are persistent. So the first section is about psychology. I'm giving you some facts about this. And first of all, I want to explain the trick you've just seen before. Normally. Okay. Okay, so I guess you understood what happened in your mind when you just guessed the right card. It was just the last one of the deck, but you maybe didn't realize that. It's because your mind was thinking about memorizing all the cards, and you didn't see that the last card was still in your mind when you were thinking about it. So magicians and mentalists tend to rely on behaviors you have, which are quite known, but maybe you don't know that. So if you use that also as chief security officers, for example, or security experts, it can be useful for you. Anyone has seen this chart before? Maybe? It's not technical. Well, it's technical, but not in the IT security field. It's in psychology again. It's called the Myers-Briggs typology. It's being used by HR departments most of the time to be able to classify people into different kinds of people, extroverts, introverts, and so on. And so we can define 16 types of people. Well, it's more or less efficient, but it's useful to understand who you are going to deal with today, for example. But sometimes HR people tend to use that too much, so be careful. Okay, now I'm going to guess about you. I'm doing some horoscope.
You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of genius capacity which you haven't turned to your advantage. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. Increased creativity and curiosity are amongst the main qualities that differ from your colleagues. Discipline and self-control outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. At times you have serious doubts as whether you made the right decision or done the right thing. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when slowed down by restrictions and limitations. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept other statements without satisfactory proof. You have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. At times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you are introverted, wary, reserved. Some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic, but you like challenges. Security is one of your major goals in life. In the short future, you will be immersed in souvenirs you like. You will be proud to learn and you will feel about others. You will make some unexpected encounters with people you dream to see. You will resent plenitude and happiness.
So, did I guess right? Maybe. I don't know. But what I wanted to show you is that people like those guys are using something which is called, the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect is the way that people tend to believe in the generalized descriptions of themselves if they are given by an authoritative source. So if I say you are very nice, maybe you believe me because I'm saying that to other people too. And so it's useful for magicians, obviously, circus, there's the name Barnum, and horoscopes also. That's the way it works. It's not magic. It's just a way of doing that. It's interesting also to use that in different social opportunities, like being a chief security officer, for example. So let's summarize the first part. First one, it's important to categorize people. Try to. Because once you know which people belong to which category, it's important to be able to guess what they will be doing. Then, once you know what they're doing, you can just convince them to do something. Because, well, if you know they like security, for example, it's useful for you to know that and to be able to say, well, you have to do some pen testing because you like that, so they will just obey. I know I'm a little crude, but that's right. And the fact important also is to be able to predict behaviors. So as you saw, it's quite easy to predict behaviors. So you just have to read some books, try, and once you are being able to understand what happens, you can just apply that. Magicians do that all the time, so it's up to you to do the same. It's only methods, not magic. The second part is about who. Well, all those methods, you can just apply that to your company. Like that. Your corporate environment and your company is a complex ecosystem. You have a lot of different people. Most of the time you work in big companies. I don't know, maybe not. For me, I work in a quite big company. And the thing that is obvious, it's like nature. You have some prey, you have predators, you have people who want to behave selfishly and so on. So you have to take into account all those information and try to behave also in their interest, but also for you. So we have to, I will just explain what I mean for this kind of users. You have all the other users like CFOs, chief financial officers, for example, but it's quite different. Okay, let me start by the most important one, which is the executive people, the chief security officer, the chief executive officer, which handles the company. Obviously, they don't have time. They are difficult to reach. I didn't tell you before, I'm sorry for that, but I'm a chief security officer, so it's important to know what I'm thinking about when I'm saying this. It's difficult to reach them, to explain good and bad behaviors and so on, even to explain the objectives you have. So you have to be very precise and you have to think about what you want to say before seeing them. They also tend to reject security. That's your problem, not theirs. So you have to be very careful also, because if there's any problem, they will just say, well, that's the chief security officer's fault, not mine. That's difficult. And they are also VIP, obviously. So if they call, you have to react fast, and you have to be able to use some different ways of telling them the truth than you tell to users, for example. The good thing with those people are they have got the budget, so they have to be convinced that you want budget to do what you need. You also can rely on them if you want to have some support. I strongly rely on the government, because I'm working with the public sector for that. And they need security. Maybe they don't know that, but they need security because they need to preserve their image. They need to preserve their reputation, and for that they need security. If there's a hole and data leaks, for example, the problem is that they could be fired, so they don't want that. So it's up to you to explain that to those people, even if they don't want to understand that. Because most of the time, they just want iPads and so on. So you have to explain that, okay, iPad is okay, but you have to be very careful and so on. It's difficult. So I give you 3 advices. The first one is to be able to treat them as VIPs because they are important for you. The second one is to be factual. If you want to say something to them, you have to be precise and don't spend more than 5 minutes explaining them because maybe they won't follow you if you stay 15 minutes saying something. I've been discussing a lot in executive management committees and so on, and most of the time they just give me 5 minutes. So you have to be precise if you want budgets, for example. And the next thing is that you have to be sure that they want what you provide. If you say, I want firewalls, they don't rely on what you say. They won't provide you firewalls. If you say, I want to preserve your privacy, for example, that's okay. So you have to be sure not to disrupt production and so on. That's important. The second type of people are on the IT side, the Chief Information Officer, for example, which is also a VIP from my point of view. Now where I'm working, it's my boss. So, okay, we just discuss all the time and so on. But in some companies, the IT is connected from the security, so you have to be careful. The problem is with the IT, and they have their own goals. They don't want security all the time because it can slow down production, it can add budget costs, and so on. So you have to be careful. Also, to avoid some problems, it can be against you also for different reasons. Because, for example, you want to add XSS protection, and they don't want to train all the developers for that, and so on. And if you need some security projects, maybe you have to ask them for budget, and they don't want to share their budget. That's an issue. So you have to be very careful in what you say to them. If you are able to partner with a Chief Information Officer, not make friends but partner, it's very useful, in fact. You can just ask him for budget, you can ask him for resources, and so on. And that's easy because most of the time they understand IT, most of the times. And they also know that they need security, so that's really good for you. The 3 advices also, so it's easy. If you provide solutions that are not slowing down the production, it's okay. If it's not costly, and if you don't scare the security, the IT people, it will be okay. You can delegate security to IT. That's what I do. But once you gain confidence, it's difficult to do that, but you have to do it if you want to achieve your goals, because you're not able to do security by yourself. You have to delegate. And also, if you are able to delegate, you have to make sure not to be eaten by IT. Most of the time, I've seen that previously in different companies, people tend to give security jobs and operational projects to IT about security, and then they don't have any job left, and so they get fired. So it's very difficult to be able to handle this and keep the balance. Then once you've got confidence into the CIO, you have to talk with the IT, the teams. It's the same. They don't always follow you. I've got a lot of issues sometimes because they don't want to train, they don't want to learn XSS avoidance, and they don't want to be able to keep a hand only as users and not on administrators on all the workstation and so on. For them, security is not evident. You see, since most of the time they have super admin rights, for example, they don't realize it's dangerous to have their PC workstations connected to internet at the same time. They don't realize it's important not to disclose sensitive information outside and so on. So you have to train them. And on the positive side, And they can be motivated, they can be trained, they have some time for that. Sometimes it's possible to act with the HR department and ask for training for them. And if you explain well what are the benefits, they can be very motivated. They can help you also to do security. And that's what I did, because I never had any team for me, dedicated team for all the security things. So I had to use the IT. The IT teams, sorry. And then they know really that they need security for the systems. They are the one who know. Maybe they won't apply the patches on the servers because it's troublesome and they don't want to lose time and money on that, but they know that's important. So I guess that's mostly the most important people to train about this. Establishing relations with IT is simple. You just have to meet them at coffee breaks. That's what I do. No formal meetings because they don't follow you. But if you have some charismatic approach, it's interesting because you listen to them, they tell you about all the issues they have, and you say, wow, that's an issue not caused by IT but security. Maybe you could solve it like this. And that's sometimes the ways I give advice to. The second thing is that you have to establish a direct link with them. That's important because if you ask the information through the chief information officer, maybe you have some issues to get all the truth. Maybe you have some filtering because the CIO doesn't want to disclose all the problems they have. And if you establish direct links like that, the good point also is that you can delegate. Well, not officially, I know, but it's useful because you can give orders without using the CIO as a way to give orders. So you don't have the budget, but that's okay. You don't have the resources, but they do work for you. And that's what I've did since the beginning, in fact. And the thing I also noticed is that they have a lot of rights. As you know, most people in the IT have got super admin rights. They are root, the administrators. They don't understand that it is dangerous. How many amongst you are using their PCs, Macs, or Unix systems as root or administrators? No? Okay. Most people in the IT still do. That's an issue. If you don't enforce rules, they don't do what you do, what should be wise. A kind of users also use really a lot in the security field is the help desk. It's not exactly the IT team because they don't have the same skills. They also communicate. They're also in first line with the users. And most of the time they are outsourced. It's not all the time in your company. They can be outsourced in different companies. But the important thing to know is that, well, they also have admin rights. They have a lot of knowledge about your company. They know all the issues. They know people. They know, well, a lot of sensitive things. So you have to be very careful how they manage that, how they handle that. And you have also to be, I'm sorry, I've missed my English. You have also to be very confident on what they do because they could really mess up everything. For me, the positive point is that it's the best incident source. Everything happens in the company has to go through the help desk. Well, that's my point of view. And that's the way it goes when I've been in different companies. The good thing is that they know exactly what's happening. So if you have any doubt, any question, you can just call them and they will answer you most of the time with the facts and verity. It's also the best contact with users. I use helpdesk a lot to distillate information to them because most of the time when I speak like that, they won't. They just follow for 1 or 2 days and then they forget. Since the help desk is constantly in contact with them, you can just ask the help desk to reiterate and say the same things again and again, so that's useful. And also, they need security to help them, because the more security is applied on PCs, workstations, and so on, the less incidents they have, obviously. So that's useful for them, and that they understand that if you help them to enforce security, and if they help you, to enforce security, they will have less things to do. That is good for them. So for me, it's important not to neglect those people because they help you a lot. And you have to train them as soon and as fast as possible because they are very important for you. And they need to be conscious about this. That's important. How many people amongst you have got trainees in your companies? A lot, I guess. Well, I heard someone saying that trainees were like cancer, They spread everywhere, they do bad things and so on. You cannot eradicate them, they always go. And so on. But that was humoristic. But that's right, in fact. It's difficult to train trainees about security. Just take a few of them for one day, explain them the basics of security in the company, and a few weeks after they have forgotten everything, or maybe they have left. So it's a repetition. You have to do that all the time. But that's important to partnership with HR, Human Resources Department, to establish a program when trainees come to be sure that the first day they come, they have got some training about security. On the good side, there are good incentives for you. They are able to make you understand what are the new trends because they come with new PCs, with peer-to-peer, and they start downloading things you don't want them to download and so on because they are not used to your environment. So they bring you new ideas of how to fight about security issues, how you can improve them. For example, it was them who brought iPads and so on in the company. So we understand it was important and so on. And they also keep you awake for the obvious reason that you cannot sleep when they are acting. That's fair. So important to be strict about enforcement because otherwise they won't apply and you have to set up a basic training. So, for example, we do that once every 2 months and all the trainees have to go to this mandatory course. That's important. I also take some time to understand what their vision of security is because they are young most of the time. They don't have the same vision of security. I think about using iPads, for example, and iPhones, using social networks. It's not the same as elder people think, for example. So we have to be open on this. That's interesting to ask them. And so from time to time, I also hire trainees and students in my department to see and to discuss with them, to understand, and also to delegate some work so they can just pass the message to their colleagues, friends, that, security is not only to block everything. So they can just tell other trainees during coffee breaks that, they're doing things which are interesting. And finally, we have end users. Everybody has got this kind of users, obviously, also. The first problem I have with end users is that they are reluctant to change. Well, that's obvious. Most of the time, they're still using Windows 95 now. No, but really, if you take Office, for example, MS Office, it's very difficult for them to train to new Office 2010, for example, because the user interface is different, the way of using that is different, and so on. So they are reluctant to change, and sometimes, they say to me, I've got a training 6 years ago about security, it was not what you said. Yeah, okay. But the problem is that everything's moving on, and they don't realize that all the time. Sometimes also they underestimate security because, they have a PC or Mac at home. They say, at home I have an antivirus, it's okay. I don't understand why you spend so much time about security. Why you are telling that all the time. We've got a Facebook account at home. It doesn't make any problem, and so on. So they don't understand what we are doing at Chief Security Officer. And I also believe it's not your problem because they don't even know you exist sometimes. They think it's all about IT. And the problem is that, it's not all about IT. For them, the central point is help desk. So help desk is IT for them in their minds. And sometimes you have to explain those users that IT wants something that you don't want to have for different reasons, I just explained before. So it's difficult also to train users, and you have to be very patient in explaining them what is good and what is not good. And most of the time they don't like that. The example I have is about iPhones. I didn't want to introduce iPhones where I work. Obviously, it was a security issue for me because we didn't control all the information about data leaks and so on. And the problem is that it was not me who decided. It was users. And to be precise, it was VIPs. So it's difficult to go against those people, you know. On good points, well, they have time for you. I mean, you can organize training sessions. There's always ways to do that with the HR department and say that, okay, you can have a training for one day and we'll explain everything. That's possible. It's not possible for chief executive officers because they don't have time, but you also have. They can help you because if you explain correctly what you want, they can just be proactive. It's difficult, but it's possible. And also they have PCs and Macs at home. So, well, they're not so stupid. They can just help you because they know a bit about security. Not exactly what you think about because they don't know about backups. They don't know about, let's say, ideas because they don't have ideas at home. But they can be proactive sometimes. So if you say that they need to enforce a password, for example, they can understand what it means and why it's important to do that. The most important thing is to build a positive image and a strong reputation of yourself so they are able to rely on you. If you act in the shadows, they don't know you, that's not good because they don't understand that security is present in the company. If you're able to do some actions to show what means security, that it's useful and so on, that's good. If you're able to organize trainings, that's also interesting and useful. And if you are able to use the press to do some articles, to do some television shows and so on, to explain them at home what they have to do, that's useful because they will do that at work. That's what I'm saying here. I did that a few years ago. I was organizing my first training in the company I'm working here now, And the thing is that people didn't assist because it was not mandatory to go. That's the first point. And then I was saying that it was about security at the corporation. And that doesn't interest anybody. They don't care, in fact. And then I kept the same slide, but I changed the title. It was Security at Home, how to enhance that for you and your family. And, there was a lot of people coming. Because it was exactly the same. We did the same speech about the same things, about anti-spam and filtering and so on, but it was for home. How your kids have to go safely on the internet and so on. And, it was a success. So that's important. And once they are trained on this, because they need how to enhance security at home, they will just apply that at work also most of the time. So that's useful. So to summarize, first you have to organize your relations with people, so different organizations, different ways of talking with themselves. If you have 6 kind of users, you have to do the job 6 times differently. That's very important. You have to convince everybody, from the CEO to have a budget and approbation. If you don't have the CEO, nobody will follow. Since I'm working in the public sector, I told you, I had to ask people to make laws. Well, not laws, but internal laws, I mean. And it was very complex. But once it's enforced, everybody has to follow. That's important. And the users also can help you. So you have to convince them that security you put is not against them. It can be useful. And then you have to lead. It's easy to say, I know. But it's important to establish a strong image and reputation. And if they know that what you are talking about and doing is not crap, is useful, people think it's useful, they just will be convinced. That's the Barnum effect, So you have to communicate and people will help you. As I said, I'm the only one doing IT security where I work, but I have a huge team of all my users and the IT people. That's very nice, which helped me. Oh. I got you. It was a false positive. Do you know about the Portal org? Well, the game Portal, they did that during a show because there was a secret code embedded in the blue screen. It was a false blue screen also. And the speaker was explaining some things, and there was a blue screen with a secret code you had to enter for the org, the augmented reality game. It was a very nice game. I'm not talking about the Portal game, but the game which was outside with all the cryptographic and all the steganography things. You have to dig into Google about this. Okay, let's continue. Some facts I've been able to leave. My previous company was called Clear Channel. It was in Texas and international also. So we had 3 different locations. Well, I was involved in 3 different locations. I was basically hired in Paris. And I got my orders from Paris, obviously, but also from London. Because London was managing all Europe. And then, well, the headquarters were in Texas. And the thing which is very interesting is that I was able to leverage all those different cultures to establish my own way of seeing security and enforcing it. Officially, I was attached to the local chief information officer. He was not speaking English. That was a good point for me. So I had to go to Texas and London with him. And so I had all the strategic vision of what people in Texas wanted to improve and to implement. So I had a long-term vision of 5-6 years ahead of what Clear Channel wanted to do, which was merging all the IT with Texas. That's interesting for me. That means outsourcing, so I could lose my job. I did lose my job because of that. Because, well, they just got rid of IT. But the good thing is that I was also having a good relationship with all the executives in France, the chief executive officers, financial officers in France, which were giving me budget, which were very confident of what I was saying and doing. And sometimes it was also useful for me to use this kind of relation because the IT was not okay with me, sometimes. So, okay. When IT was not okay, I said, well, the CEO is okay, so you have to do. When the CEO was not okay, well, Texas is okay. So you have to do, and so on. So it was like a deck of dominoes, you know. You just try to find the right card and you play it to be sure everybody wins. And that was my first lesson about power and ties between people. I did understand what I didn't understand before, that it was not about technical issues, but also political issues in people. So, in summary, it was like this. The French CIO was favoring French executives, which were favoring London, and London didn't want to disappoint Texas. So, when you understand that, it was possible to act on different levels to be able to establish what you wanted to do. So when people didn't want to do, well, you can just bypass the French CIO. Officially, it's not good, but sometimes it's useful. So I did, for example, some phone calls to Texas to say, well, okay, in France we have some issues because the French CIO doesn't want to have applied, doesn't have budget for that, so what can we do? And Texas told me, well, okay, we're enforcing 2701 in Texas, maybe you can just ask for the French CIO to do the same. And they say, well, okay, but the French executives don't have the budget. Okay, so we'll have to ask London for that. So I went to London and say what we have to do with that, and so on. So it's a game of asking people and communicating with people to try to find a solution. And it works, in fact. The second point is that they have different languages, culture, and vision. It's very interesting and funny at the same time. When the French CIO told Texas that they were doing some projects about security, well, Texas understood what French was saying, but they didn't understand what they were doing because it was different in their minds. The words were the same, but their vision was different. And we had a lot of trouble about that because the French and Americans didn't have the same vision, even if they share the same words. And so, I'm lucky. I have been grown in the U.S. when I was a kid, so I knew a little bit of things like that. And so I was able to do the mediator, the people between all those people, to try to convince the French that Americans were not going so wrong and so on. And that's difficult, but quite interesting. And finally, I won because of this. My actual job is in Switzerland. So I'm chief security officer of this place, which is called Canton du Jura. It's a very small place, I know. I don't know if you are aware of this, but Switzerland is divided into states, sovereign states, so they have their own parliaments and so on. It's very strange. And the state I'm working for is very small, you see. It's very small. We have only this amount of citizens. It's very, very dense like that, you see. It's not like Paris. And the thing is that for me, it's very interesting because it's a real state. It's like that. We have a government, we have state chancellery, we have prisons, we have sports, culture, we have schools, environments, hospitals, roads, and so on. That I have to enforce security for that. But that's my job. And it's huge. I mean, it's a small state, but the environment is very complex. And we have about 400 applications, which are different. For example, we have speed limit controls. So that's IT, technically. So I have to enforce security so people don't cheat on this. We have taxes. So we have to be strict and be sure people don't see who pays what and so on. The same for healthcare and so on. That's very interesting. The problem is that I'm the only one to manage all that, so it's not possible, obviously. So I had to establish some ties with people from all these departments, and that was very tricky. It took me a few years, in fact, to understand all the details. And that's the point. If you want to be a smart CISO, you have to avoid all the dangers in this kind of complex environments. You have to be sure not to be the next scapegoat, because it's very political. You have to understand the ecosystem like that. It can be very, very complex in some departments, and it also moves all the time. So for where I work, the government is renewed every 4 years. So every 4 years, everything is reorganized. All the departments change, people are hired, and so on. So you have to reassess everything all the time, every 4 years. You have to understand all the inside ties. I had a lot of problems with that because it's a small place, and so everybody knows everybody. And the problem is that officially they don't know them, but they drink beers in the evening, they exchange point of views, and sometimes if you don't know that, that's dangerous. And then I had to find all the strong partners once I understand all the ties like that to be able to do something interesting. And you have to be as smart as your leaders, because otherwise you get fired. So the fact is that you have to understand the ecosystem you have, you're living in, including everything you don't see. That's difficult. You have to associate people with people. You have to partnership with people who understand the environment to help you. And then you have to make those people help you. That's difficult, but that's important. And so your company looks like that. You should be here. Well, you're the chief security officer, but also the CEO are here, and they look at the company. And the problem is that you have to be aware about how to stay a long time in the company. So your given objectives are this one. You have to ensure the corporate security and repel villains. You have to spend as little money and resources as possible as a chief security officer to please the chief financial officer. You have to work very hard because, as you see, I had a huge environment to protect, so I have to work very hard. And also, you have to follow all the orders you are given by the Chief Information Officer, and you have to be sure not to disturb them. That's very difficult. So that's the objective you have given. So you are like that, working all the time. That's very difficult. But real objectives should be this one. Wow, you have to stay at the companies as long as you can. Obviously, that's not so easy, in fact. You have to delegate as much work as you can also. I'm not able to do everything. I'm speaking here at this conference. I should be working maybe. And so I have to delegate. And I don't have any team for that, so I have to find ways to do it. And everything's about power, in fact. You have to understand that. So how to leverage that? We'll see that in a few minutes. It's about politics also. No, sorry, I've got an issue. Okay. I've experienced that the more you have responsibilities, the more you work on eggs. Is that right in English expression? Well, it's dangerous. When I was working as a pen tester, it was easy. We were a team, and I didn't have any risk of being fired from day to day because there were plenty of people, and it was okay. I'm the single chief security officer for the canton, so people don't like me, in fact. That's the problem. So I can't be fired. I can't be a scapegoat for any political reasons and so on. That's very delicate. So I have to communicate. I have to be a leader, and I have to have a vision. And so I have to be smart to avoid the wolves because I'm the fox. That's my vision. And so there's a book about this. Well, maybe that's not the one. I hope you like it. That's it. It's called 48 Laws of Power. Who amongst you know this book? No? It's a must read, I will tell you. Okay, there are 48 laws that people use to be president, chief security officers like me, and so on. And it's very Machiavellic, as you see. The first one is never to outshine the master, and the second one is to learn how to use enemies, and so on. It's not very nice, but you have to learn this because people around know that and they apply that. If you work in a political environment, I guess they all have read and applied this. That's dangerous. So they're like this. And you don't want to be here. You want to be here not to get fired. That's important. This book is this one. I've got it here, if you want to see. There are two editions, the small one and the big one. If you see the small one is pocket edition. You can have it with you all the time. It's important to see, and it's very interesting. But I ask you something. If you read that, just stay on the good side of the force because, it's dark powders. It's it can be very, very strong also to destroy people. It's like a rootkit. And then, that's the last slide, so it's okay. If you want to be elected, if you want to keep your job and so on, you have to be charismatic. The guy on the right, he's quite charismatic because he knows. I guess he did read the book. That's obvious, and he knows how to talk to people. He knows how to write messages like that, and so on. That's important for you to understand that the best way to communicate is to smile, to be able to be charismatic, and people will follow you. People will train about security. And they won't be reluctant. They won't be avoiding you and so on. That's important for me, for example. And if you don't understand that, just reread the book. And that's it. And you will be happy to get to work. That's it. この気楽なことすべては私の思い通りやるべきことをしようそれは生きてる人だけのため失敗するたび泣いても仕方がない景気のためにやりなさいそして素晴らしい充実ました生きて Okay. If you have any questions? No? I can give you the microphone. Last thing I didn't mention is that I'm organizing a small hackerspace event in August in Switzerland, where I live. So you can just note the website and go to see.
Is this one? Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. It might be a little bit of an evil question.
Yeah.
In your talk, you were basically explaining communication and, for example, also hiring strategies for security personnel, IT personnel.
Yeah.
And you have quite a large user base, and you have in your role, in your job, a quite large base of employees and people you have to interact with. So let me start my question with an example. When Google back then experienced Aurora, like this Aurora incident, they, at least that was the public appearance of the whole thing, kind of experienced a trauma, an incident trauma. Oh. And they started to hire everybody who could spell the word security. They got almost everybody on the market in their security team. Okay. And this is still the situation right now. So my question is, what would you do in case there is an actual incident, and how would you recommend to encounter such an incident and work with such an incident? Okay.
We did have incidents, obviously. The problem is that it depends. You have some technical incidents and, user incidents, I'll call them. The last incident we had, which was very important for us, was a user incident. We had an issue with people surfing on porn sites, And the problem is that we didn't notice that it was VIPs. Unless so we kept on escalating incidents, and once we discovered who were those people, it was a very political issue. It went to the press, television, and so on. It was a sex scandal affair, as you know, with DSK and some people like that. And so it was very, very difficult to manage. We had to do a lot of meetings. We had to think about what we were saying and so on. So my job was to try to be as silent as possible on this thing, not to react too abruptly, and also to convince that, it can happen not to us all the time, but also to other people. So it was not a major incident. We had to calm people about this. On the positive side, it was the best way to train people I've ever experienced. People never went to websites like that after, because they knew we were monitoring. Yes?
One thing that you didn't talk about, that I'd like to hear your comment on, is with regards to users that break policy, break security, do not follow the rules. Of the 48 rules of power, which one do you use to punish the users?
That's a good point. If I was in the US, it would be simple. I just would fire them. In France, it's impossible. When I was working in France, we had all the union issues and so on, so it was impossible to do that. I'm still working in a public environment, so we still cannot fire people like that. The best way to do that is that we take the HR department with us, and with him we do meetings with the boss of the people who don't follow the rules. We try to explain them once. Then we send them to a mandatory training to say, it's like driving. When you have accidents, you have to do some training if you want to get your permit back. It's the same for us. So you have to go to the training, mandatory. We explain them again, it's not wise to do what you did and so on. And that should be okay. If they still don't do that, the HR department tries to fire them or a bit to lower their income and so on, their pay. We did that. For the porn affair, we had to lower the incomes of a few people. Questions? Yeah.
Aren't you afraid that now you disclose all your tricks, they don't work anymore, and your colleagues could detect your power plays and defeat them?
I guess not. Those tricks, I didn't invent them. It was invented by Machiavelli and people like that centuries ago. And people still don't understand them. Maybe they don't read books, I don't know. So you can try the same tricks again and again and again. It's like exercise, It never ends. So that's good. On the positive side, that's right. On the negative side, if people who works with me, for example, read what I'm writing, that I could have some issues. That's right. Because they could realize that, well, I'm also doing the political play that other players like all the government does. So I'm also trying to save my life in this company, or in this place, sorry. Other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.